All right, well, good evening, everybody. At 6 o'clock, so I'm going to call the meeting of committees to order. Mr. Harris, we're going to start with the roll call of members, and then I'll have some reminders and announcements at the top of the meeting. Mr. Harris?
Mr. Mitt,
Here.
Mr. Moya, Mr. Police,
Here.
Ms. Grant,
Here.
Ms. Diaz,
Here.
Mr. Hirsch,
Here.
President Big.
Here. Councilor Rayo is excused this evening. Okay, so a few reminders and announcements for council and everyone here's with us. So please take a moment to silence your phones and your devices if you haven't done so already. This meeting and its participants are being recorded. So tonight we have meetings of committees of council. Just be advised there is no general public comment periods during this meeting. However, committee chairs may call for comments from the public for legislative items, which are bills and resolutions. Comments, if there are any, are limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and please begin with your name and block of residence for our meeting minutes. As you may have noticed, counselors and attendees, we have returned to using our committee meeting table. This is an effort to make a distinction between this type of meeting and our regular meeting, bring us closer, and also encourage more discussion between members of council, which is difficult to do on a dais when we're all trying to look around each other. So a couple of notes about that. The speakers in front of us will allow us to be heard on the live stream, and we've asked our audience to sit in the first 2 rows so we can be heard in the room. Please do speak up, but you don't need to yell, counselors, that's okay. Anyone who's making public comment tonight, if it's called for, can simply stand and do it from their seat. And any presenters will be asked to come up to the table this evening and join us. So, all right. And thank you for helping us and bearing with us as we work on this new/old format for this meeting. All right, counselors, the first item tonight is the approval of the May 5th, 2025 committee meeting minutes. I'll hear a motion on those.
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any council comments on the meeting minutes? All right, hearing none. Mr. Harris, if you'd call the roll on this one.
Mr. Mitt,
Aye.
Mr. Police,
Aye.
Ms. Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
Mr. Hirsch,
Aye.
President Big.
Aye. Right. That'll take us to the committee of the whole, which we're doing at the head of the meeting tonight. The first item is our Ethics Commission and applicant interviews. So we will hold our final interviews for applicants to the Ethics Commission this evening. As a reminder, we heard from our first nominee at our last meeting. Applicants were chosen for interviews by ranked choice voting system. Thank you to all of you. And originally interviews were held for the top 4 vote getters, but there was a tie, so there will be 5 total. We'll have 4 this evening. We will not be voting this evening. As a reminder, motions to nominate will be heard at our June 10th regular meeting of council. And applicants, you're not required to attend that meeting, but you're of course welcome to. So for our applicants, I'll have you come up and have a seat and join us. I'll ask you to affirm questions that you've already affirmed, but do so for the meeting record. And then you'll have a minute to introduce yourself, talk about why you'd like to serve, and then there'll be time for questions from council. And as we did at our last meeting, counselors, we'll just go around and we can ask a question and a follow-up if we'd like of the applicant. So we'll begin with Mr. Paul Colbreth, who's here this evening. Hello, please come on up. If you could have a seat right next to Councilor Diaz there. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for being here. All right, Mr. Colbreth, I'm going to ask you to affirm those questions. So first, is your primary residence located within the city of Lancaster?
Yes.
Thank you. Have you held any appointed or elected office within the city government within the last year?
And no, I haven't.
Have you held any political party office within the last year?
No, I haven't.
And have you held any political action committee positions within the last year?
No, I haven't.
Thank you so much. If you would take a minute to please introduce yourself and tell us why you are interested in this commission.
Again, my name is Paul Colbreth, Lancaster resident, lifelong Lancaster resident. Born and raised, graduated from Cascade High School, a couple years of college, now a couple degrees in college, a master's in human services and a master's in social work. I spent my first probably 20 years with the Boys and Girls Club of Lancaster as the operations director. Then I moved on to children and youth and spent the next several years there as the supervisor in the child neglect unit. At that time, I was tapped to take over the Urban League of Lancaster as the president and CEO, which I've held that position for about 5 years before moving on. And I ended up at Thaddeus Stevens College, where I was the director of multicultural affairs, student engagement, and student retention. It's where I retired from. I actually retired from there. I'm currently the president of the local branch of the National Action Network, which is the social service organization that targets issues dealing with quality of life issues here in Lancaster City for our community residents.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I'm going to just go around to members of council for your questions. As a reminder, you all submitted some questions, so I just aggregated them in a list, and you can choose to use them if you wish, or you could ask a different one. Councilor Diaz, we'll just go right around. We'll begin with you.
How do you see yourself holding accountability to the checks and balance needed for the city and fairness to the residents?
In many of my positions, I've held those types of responsibilities, especially in the area with issues with the city, issues with the college, issues with community residents. So I have, I think, a strong background in holding people, organizations, and entities accountable.
Thank you.
Councilor Hirsch.
Thank you, Paul, for joining us. How do you kind of ensure that your personal beliefs or biases maybe don't affect necessarily a situation where you're called to be an impartial arbiter or mediator? How do you ensure that?
You have to shoot. You have artillery ears. So
No worries. Sorry about that. How do you ensure that your personal beliefs don't necessarily conflict with your responsibility to be an impartial arbiter or mediator?
How would I? I'm really not understanding your question.
Just asking, like, how do you make sure that your personal beliefs or biases don't get in the way of being neutral?
Okay, that was.
Sorry, that's a little more concise.
During my tenure at Thaddeus Stevens, I ran and orchestrated or organized a program where we had to bring a lot of folks in to check out their ability to be biased in some of the decision making pertain to the college itself, its programs, its students, and things like that. I myself, had to make sure that my biases didn't impact any of my decisions, and I'm pretty comfortable with of separating myself from the issue at hand, my biases and feelings and things of that nature to the issue at hand, and deal with only the facts.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just help him as we go around. Mr. Culver, thank you again for being here tonight. This is, of course, a volunteer position. Have you ever served on any other volunteer boards or commissions, and what did you learn from that experience?
I served, I did a stint here in Lancaster on the Human Relations Commission. I think I served probably about one term on there. I think that was during, I would date myself, but
That's okay.
it was early. And, I was introduced to a lot of the things that will be impacting the city and some of the things that the Ethics Committee will be dealing with.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colbert, for being here with us this evening. How do you believe that integrity and honesty in elected officials can build community engagement or trust?
Uh, it's paramount to building the trust, especially with the community. If you don't have integrity, you can't really accomplish anything. The integrity will lead to, holding the city administration, city folks, and everybody accountable to the issues at hand or the ethical issues that may be confronted by the city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, Paul. Thank you for your willingness to serve. How will you ensure that your decisions are consistent across cases within the commission, regardless of a person's political power or connections?
Well, I think you have to really be comfortable with your ability to understand the issues and to really analyze the issue, and then, like you said, make sure that your personal opinions and things
but also proactively guide city officials on how to make good decisions that reflect the values of justice, diversity, transparency, and community benefit. Uh, Considering both the intended and unintended impacts of the decisions we make, and the desires that our residents have for their communities. So that's what really brings me here to this table.
Thank you so much. Council Diaz now.
So how do you see yourself holding accountability to checks and balance needed for the city and the fairness to the residents?
Good question. I think when it comes to accountability, especially through an ethics commission, it really comes through transparency and making sure that the ethics commission is transparent in the work it does, whether it is reporting at a city council or publishing their findings for the public to see. So when it comes to accountability, our role as the ethics commission is to review and report. It is up to the city and how they would like to decide to punish, as far up to charges if need be. So that's how that would.
Councilor Hirsch.
Thank you, Grant. I couldn't help but notice in reviewing your application, and you mentioned your human resources background. And so I can imagine that you've probably come across a situation where you have handled an ethics complaint. Can you talk about how you approach that and how you'd handle that situation?
Yeah, usually ethics complaints or complaints in general are met with investigatory powers of HR. So often it is interviewing firsthand people who have, are impacted, getting their sides of the story, getting any third-party witnesses, and then ultimately coming to a decision, whether it is as a team, HR team, or looking for other players, other city officials to advise on whether good practices were followed, and then ultimately coming up with a decision on what action plan will be put in place for that ethics infraction.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you tell us about any other volunteer positions you've held on boards or commissions? What were they, and what was something you learned by doing that?
Yes, currently I serve on the personnel committee of the ODC, or Occupational Development Center of Lancaster. I've learned a lot from them. I've learned that running a small nonprofit is not easy, and that you really do have to work with the community to build your base, your resources in order to survive.
This is true.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Councilor Med.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
How do you believe that integrity and honesty in elected officials can help build trust and engagement in the community?
Yeah, integrity, I think people like to think of it as, making the right decision when nobody's looking. And I think that the ethical code of conduct or an ethical framework would help develop trust with the community, knowing that there is guidelines for decision making in the city that put the community at the center. So when integrity is mentioned, I think when we hold our city officials and myself to integrity, I think it comes down to is when nobody's watching across the table inside the committee meetings, are we treating each other with respect, have similar goals towards justice, truth, and ultimately community benefit?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Caliche.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for being here tonight. How will you ensure that your decisions are consistent across cases within the commission, regardless of a person's political power or connections?
Oh yeah, I think it comes from listening. Ultimately, we are a bunch of people with different opinions in a room. If it ever came to the point of needing to recuse myself, I would do that. But listening to different opinions I think it's imperative to coming to a consensus.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Could you tell us about a time when you had an ethical dilemma and how you solved it?
Absolutely. So in a former position that I held, I did hold a POA with the IRS. And once that position was done, ethically, I had a responsibility to end that POA and no longer represent the company. So in that regard, that ethics dilemma was resolved. I think there's other ethics dilemmas that I've noticed. One that particularly is recent, one that shows that residents aren't being prioritized in our city, and that comes with the residential permanent parking program. We are in a parking crisis, and as the city committed to reviewing our residential permit parking program, we might not see any changes until 2026. Meanwhile, the parking authority has committed to continued ticketing and now continued ticketing via cameras. So putting that ethical framework into the lens, is it okay to, what's it called, fine before we fix, was the saying that I put in place. So that's kind of like an example of how an ethical framework would guide decision making here and now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Counselors, any additional questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Christopher Solt. Christopher, you're the first one here and you're the last one to
That's
be interviewed.
okay.
But I was going alphabetically, so I
That's quite all right.
apologize for that. Okay, I'm going to have you affirm these questions. Is your primary residence within the city of Lancaster?
Yes,
Have you held any appointed or elected office within the city government within the last year?
I have not.
Have you held any political party office within the last year?
I have not.
Have you held any political action committee position within the last year?
I have not.
Excuse
Bless
me.
you.
All right, I'm going to give you a minute to introduce yourself and talk about why you'd like to serve.
Great. Mayor, Madam President, council members, I'm really honored to be here. I'm also really enjoyed hearing the interviews of the other candidates. My name is Chris Solt. I was born and raised in Vermont. Actually grew up in Burlington, Vermont, which I'll get back to next very quickly. Then I moved to Cleveland, Ohio, and I lived in the inner city there for about 27 years. And then my wife and I moved here in 2018, and we love it here. We're never moving. Love this place dearly. I worked for an organization called 10,000 Villages, which is just 20 minutes north of here, starting in 2006. And I traveled to the city often. And so I got to know the city for about last 20 years and fell in love with it. So I kind of feel like this is kind of my kind of new adopted home. Yeah, so I've worked in the fair trade world for about 20 years. And I saw somebody sent me this opportunity and I was like, oh, I see a lot of what I've devoted my career to in this position. I think that what you all do in public service is, I think, a very special kind of calling. It also has a special responsibility, which I think is something that should be shared with the community. So I think that's a really interesting new opportunity for the city to help, I'd say, be a better city.
Thank you so much. Great, Councilor Diaz.
Thank you for coming. How do you see yourself holding accountability to the checks and balance needed for the city and fairness to our residents?
Yeah. Well, as you could probably tell, like being in the fair trade world, the fairness is something that is very passionate. I'm very passionate about. And kind of interestingly, in my organization now, we have a code of practice that we hold 200 small businesses to in the United States and Canada. They've agreed to behave a certain way, and they've asked us to hold them accountable. So I'm very familiar with that kind of dance, right? It's a very important one to make. I think that within a group, having lots of diverse opinions, that's all very great, and building community within that group is important. But to understand the letter of the law, right, and the rule of law that we have agreed to work with, right? So I think being very mindful and building a lot of understanding with what are the tools that we are actually using to work, rather than like my own personal opinion about a policy or something that impacts me as a resident. I think continuously grounding ourselves in the basis of the Ethics Act, which was passed by the Pennsylvania legislature.
Thank you. Councilor Hirsch.
Thank you, Chris, for being here. I was going to ask how your personal beliefs, how do you avoid them interfering with your decision making? You kind of just spoke to that. So I'll ask, how would you handle a situation where someone was the subject of an ethics complaint?
If I knew them?
Yes, or if they were a colleague, if they were someone you worked with. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously it depends on certainly the context and situation, of course. But for the sake of this question, I'd say once understood the context of that situation, then first I would probably want to recuse myself. If that was, I would automatically offer that if that would help the situation come to some better resolution. Being able to understand the hat that you wear, per se, is really important in any kind of ethics work that you would do. And knowing that if my presence as an individual would then undermine the successful outcome of that is very, very important to understand. It's challenging, obviously, and kind of messy, but I think that my first inclination would be to, if I knew somebody and they were part of it, that I would recuse myself.
Thank you.
Can you tell us about any volunteer boards or commissions you've served on in the past? What were they, and what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah. So I've served on, when I lived in Cleveland, I was part of a little a housing cooperative, and I was the vice president and treasurer of that organization for about 7 years. I was the several positions on the Hessler Neighborhood Association, Historic Preservation, New Community Development Organization in Cleveland. That was probably about 10 years. And I'm currently the vice president of the World Fair Trade Organization. I'm in my second term. I was elected in September of 2019 in Lima, Peru, by this global group of fair trade enterprises around the world. I served one term, which was extended. It was a 4-year term. It was extended 5 years to 1 year. Excuse me, to 5 years from 4 years because of the pandemic. And then was just reelected last September in Cape Town, South Africa, to another term, and then was internally elected to be the vice president. That's all volunteer. And also I've worked my 10 years with 10,000 Villages. I did a lot of nonprofit board development as well across the United States and in Canada. And so there's a couple others, but that's kind of the bulk of it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Councilor Ahmed.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you for being here this evening, sir. How do you believe that integrity and honesty in elected officials can build trust and engagement in the community?
Yeah. But someone else just mentioned our current political dialogue and the tone right now is really stark. I think that in Lancaster City, especially, we have an opportunity to control what we have going in our community. The integrity and trust that you all have and Lancaster elected officials have with the residents is the currency by which you are able to spend the trust of the residents and that you're supposed to represent their interests. And if that's seen as somehow damaged or somehow tainted in some way, then it doesn't allow you to fully represent all the residents in the city to make the best community possible. I mean, it's really the biggest issue.
Right.
Thank you. Councilor Cleeks.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you for being here tonight. And how will you ensure that your decisions are consistent across cases within the commission, regardless of a person's political power or connections?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And it's also a very, very difficult one to ensure, but it is the right question to be asking. I think certainly from my own individual standpoint, being very, very mindful about my own presentation and my own power and privilege and white male, old, I've got gray beard here, English speaking, US passport. I have a whole list of things that have some type of power and privilege associated with them, and being mindful about what that represents to people is really important. Also, all of the individuals within, the ethics commission would also be very, very important to understand as well. And then in all of the individuals involved in a specific case are also really important to understand. Then, we can have our own opinions, we can have our own thoughts, we're all human, but like the code is the code, right? So like that is what we go by. We can discuss all of our opinions about things and the way we feel or emotions or whatever. We're humans, that's relevant in that conversation, but any action needs to be cited by the Ethics Act, right? So it's important to vent and have those discussions in community and collaboration, and also making sure that everyone, no matter their power and privilege, has a way to be heard and listened and respected. But the law's the law, right? So that I think is what will drive everything.
Thank you.
Counselor Craig.
Hello.
Hello.
Could you tell us about a time when you had an ethical dilemma and how you solved it?
Oh my goodness, I have so many, and that I could share publicly. I've been in HR and training for a long time, so I have lots of examples where there was a complaint, an ethics complaint, and then there was another a reaction to someone who was a part of that, and oftentimes, those conflicts, which I have a lot of experience, unfortunately, with conflict management. That usually those are misunderstandings, so like being able to listen to people and have them be heard and respected, and then bring them together to them understand there's some issue here, right, but there's also some misunderstanding, trying to build understanding. I'm generalizing because I don't want to go into specific examples, but that's usually how I approach those. One example that I can share is like I say, just in so I'm the executive director of the Fair Trade Federation, and we have, like I said, 200 businesses in the United States and Canada. If you're at all familiar with the fair trade movement, it comes from a great place, right? It's wanting to do good, to represent marginalized producers and farmers around the world. The way I was introduced to it was Sally Struthers, and it was so othering, this experience where it was like this white saviorism. You give $1 a day, this person's starving little kid in Ethiopia can have a slightly better life. And that whole kind of like culture and language of othering, white saviorism, and heropreneurship, as I like to call it, has been kind of the heart of that. That's the kind of values pitch, and it's not right, right? So like I kept pointing this out to the organization for many years, and finally got to a place where I was like, okay, we need to do something about this and like decolonize the language that we're using, right? So it doesn't other those people. We're saying one thing and we're telling this emotional story, but what we're doing actually has harm to other people. So when I said, okay, I'm the old white guy in the room, I don't think this is right, but we need to do something about this. And I probably am not the person to be the face of this conversation. So I recused myself from that whole conversation and created a space for people who were really passionate about the issue, and they talked about it and came up with a JEDI commission, Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and they were given a charge to go through and decolonize a lot of our language. We it's a slow thing because it's a big, kind of cultural change. So that was one thing where I feel like I used my power and privilege to kind of create a space for others, where I saw, like back to what I was saying earlier, me being in that conversation probably wouldn't be the best. I mean, I would be there if it was needed, but there's the optics of it as well. So that was one thing. I know it's a complicated ethical thing, but to me, that was something where I felt like I needed to step away, but help create the space for that conversation to happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselors, any additional questions? Okay, Mr. Stoll, thank you so much for being here.
Appreciate it.
For all of our applicants, thank you again. Again, we will hear motions for appointment on our next meeting at June 10th. There'll be a place on the agenda for it. As a reminder, we are charged with appointing 3 members to the Ethics Commission. So Just keep that in mind, and we will hear more at our next meeting. Thank you again. You're welcome to stay, or you can go. That's okay.
Thank you very much.
We will continue. With Committee of the Whole, our next item is the Administrative Code Introduction. Barry Handberger, City Solicitor, is here this evening to talk us through that. And Mr. Handberger, do you have a presentation?
I do.
Okay.
Mr. Harris.
Does Mr. Harris have that?
He does.
Okay, great.
Well, that's getting going. Those are great interviews, all 5 of them.
We will have a very difficult decision.
Yeah. Yeah. Difficult choice.
Yeah.
And it's an intimidating, I mean, there's 6 of us on one, so
Sure.
it's kind of a lot.
And it's a brand new thing, so. All right, please.
Well,
Welcome
following
to
up on
Administrative Code.
home rule topics,
Yes.
since you're dealing with the Ethics Commission, which is something created by the Home Rule Study Commission and the adopted charter, you also have an obligation under the charter and the home rule law to adopt an administrative code. And we have meetings scheduled later to start introducing sections of the code to you for consideration and for your beginning to have discussions and guidance towards those ends. In order to help frame that for you, I thought it would be helpful to have a presentation to go a little bit over the law that relates to it, the process that the law requires, the process that your study commission went through to frame what you're going to see ultimately and what you're ultimately going to have to adopt. So as a little bit of history and reminder, this council, by ordinance, formed a government study commission to study the form of government in the city of Lancaster. That study commission determined to move from a third-class city under the optional charter law to a home rule study, to a home rule municipality, and crafted and proposed a charter. That charter was submitted to the electors of the city of Lancaster in November of 2024 and was adopted. It became effective on January 1st, 2025. The charter and the home rule charter and optional plans law require that council by ordinance, and I want you to keep that in mind, it's by ordinance. There's a significant feature to this. By ordinance, adopt an administrative code. Mr. Harris. So understanding a little bit about what home rule does in terms of city governance is very relevant to the administrative code. As a third-class city, prior to adopting a home rule charter, the city could only do what it was specifically authorized by statute or law to do. No power to do anything that wasn't directed by the state legislature. Home rule transfers the authority to make those decisions to you, to the city, to city council and the city. Essentially, with home rule, you can now do anything that state or federal law does not prohibit. It's a big difference. So if you were to take a look at some of the operational codes in the past, the third-class city code and the third-class optional federal law being the primary ones, Mr. Harris, you can slip to the next slide. They were, in large part, pieces of legislation that set forth the authority to do things for the city. And absent that authority, or absent some other law that granted you authority, you couldn't do anything. They also set forth procedures by which you would have to do certain of those, exercise certain of those powers. So not only did the third-class city code give you the authority, but it set forth procedures that you were required to follow in order to exercise them that were dictated by the state legislature. You do not have to put in the code your powers. The powers, as we said, are going to be determined by the existence of existing law. What you do have to do is draft an administrative code that sets forth the procedures you'll follow in exercising whatever power you choose to exercise. The administrative code is adopted by ordinance, and therefore it can be amended by ordinance. This is indeed the most legislative flexibility a municipality in Pennsylvania can have. It's very free-flowing. How long does it take you to adopt an ordinance? You can do it. 2 meetings generally, right? Mm-hmm. So whatever you adopt here, you get to change. If you want, if times change, if the law changes, if your operations change. And this is the single biggest change from the way we've operated for decades, which is everything had to be specifically as set forth by a state statute. It puts the most level of self-governance that a Pennsylvania municipality can have into your hands. So we move to the next slide where they talk a little bit about what the administrative code is mandated, what you're mandated to have. The things that are going to be in your administrative code are mandated from two different sources, really three, but the two mandate sources are there some things that the home rule and optional plans law requires, and there's some things that your charter, which your electors, your voters elected and adopted, require you to include in the administrative code. 5 general categories: provisions for the exercise of a control function for the management of finances, enumeration of the departments, offices, authorities, boards, commissions, and other administrative units of the city government, their scope of responsibility, and internal procedures for operation, budgeting, accounting, and financial policies, purchasing and acquisition procedures, policies and procedures governing personnel policies, position descriptions, employee recruitment, selection, orientation, training, benefits, promotion, and discharge. Other topics will be in the administrative code that weren't mandated by the law, include things, for example, regarding forfeiture of office. So there's a provision in your charter that mandates that city council set forth the procedure to be followed in order for an elected official to have forfeited their office, be deemed to forfeit their office. There's other similar things throughout that will be throughout. In attempting to come to give you guys a starting point, because this will be your code, we've taken a few items and sort of concepts and kept them in mind as we are drafting. The first is,
Next slide.
yeah, and you can switch to the next slide, Eric. Sorry. The first is to be consistent with the terms and spirit of the charter. That's obviously the most significant, right? The charter is now your Bible. That is the law of the land. It is the single biggest law underneath the Pennsylvania Constitution. That's what your electors have said is the law. Any court's going to interpret any ambiguity as against the charter. So we obviously need to make sure that you are consistent with not only the specific language, but the spirit. Assure internal controls and checks and balances. This is to protect the taxpayers. Continue current practices where appropriate to assure that change is made only where needed or desired. Assure best practices. Obviously, the city wants to be the best it can be, and be directive only where necessary and prudent. This is to maintain your flexibility. I take these principles and I kind of summarize them in one phrase, which is sound governance. I mean, if you think about these 5, these are principles that your administrative code should set forth that assure that the city is administered and governed in a sound manner. Next slide. So what will the new code look like? What's on the screen is the table of contents from your current, on the left-hand side, from your current codified ordinances. Under the Home Rule Charter Law, our charter has to be the very first item in the code. It's already been placed there because, remember, it became effective January 1st. The administrative code doesn't have to repeat, and really shouldn't repeat, all of the things in your 62-page charter. Your electors have already determined many of the procedures that you're mandated to follow and set them out very clearly. We have in our current Code of Ordinances a next section entitled Administrative Legislation, of which there are a multitude of items. Many of these will either be merged into your administrative code, moved out of this section because they're really more general legislation than they are administrative code, and or modified in terms of new language based on the flexibility that you've now been given in terms of self-governance and quite frankly updated. So a lot of these have been in place decades and decades. And this is a good opportunity to, even where there's no real substantive change needed, some of these have references that are outdated. And so they will all be tweaked and cleaned up and incorporated into this part of it. What's below general legislation? So this is where your big legislative ordinances lie, right? So your zoning ordinance, your subdivision and land development ordinance, your building codes ordinance, your property maintenance ordinance, your stormwater ordinance, your sewer ordinance, your water ordinance, your streets ordinance, all of the big ordinances that we think of, they're not getting touched. They're still the law, and they will continue to be the law unless changed by ordinance of city council. The only thing that's getting worked on is the administrative portions, and that's what the administrative code is meant to cover. Next slide. So the next several slides are, and you notice the word draft, because you ultimately have to craft the administrative code, and what we've been working on is to give you the starting point based on, and I'll just be honest, based on, me being around the city since 1994, my experience both in-house here in the last 5 years and while serving as outside counsel for the city of Lancaster, an understanding of the law and an understanding of the things that we think should be in here. In many cases, you're not changing anything that you're doing now. So in some cases, we're making what is actually in writing conform to what we do now, which is always sometimes moved and changed without change in ordinance and legislation. But as we walk through, you'll see, obviously short title and definition. When you see something here like powers and division of powers, organizational structure, department of officials, those are all things that are already covered in your charter. This will not be a repeat of the information. These are where the study commission left places for you as council to set forth procedure and weigh in on how things will be done. So these are the broad categories, but it's not a repeat of what's in the charter. So you can see here, organizational structure. Remember, I mentioned earlier, we have to lay out all the departments and the organizational. That's mandated by the Home Rule Charter Law to be in the charter. Even though we have it in other places, we need to put it in here. And so that is one place where there is a little bit of a rinse and repeat from the charter, but that's because the law requires us to do so. You'll see salaries of elected officials is in your charter, but what's left out of the charter and on purpose from the study commission was when you make the changes. Are there any restrictions on making the changes and how? So that's what's going to be expanded upon by you folks in the draft of your administrative code. This section here, Article 5, requirements of elected officials regarding confidential information, and another section that has a similar title but covers a broader sector of employees as well. This is starting to be where your ethics code might be part of it. It could be standalone. It might be inserted in these provisions. These titles are placeholders for me and the mayor in order to express places where some of this language may appear. Next slide, please. So again, if you recall your administrative ordinances section of your current code, a lot of these topics that you see under city council are being repeated. The reason being is, again, we're going to take that set of language that's already there and we're going to bring it current to your current practices. There are some things that need to be mandated in the code by the charter. So for example, the charter mandates that you meet twice a month, right? So there are things that have to be brought current as we do this. Again, Article 7, ordinances and resolutions. Again, there's things left blank or unsaid in terms of some of the specific procedures in terms of ordinances and resolutions in the administrative code. You have provisions for that now, and a lot of those are going to be merged right into here. I mentioned earlier, there's a new provision required by the charter regarding forfeiture of offices. Of office of elected officials. So this is a section you will not have seen or even had any sight to see anywhere before. And you can slip to the next slide, Bernard, please. When we get to boards, commissions, and authorities, again, there's some new methodologies and requirements in the charter for how members are appointed. This is laying out a little bit more detail. It will also do something that's necessary, which is to confirm that current board members' terms will continue. One of the sort of oddities of the law is by adopting a new charter. We've already done it with your charter, but we need to do it again with the administrative code. There'll be things like trainings are covered in here, which is not something that currently exists, but something that we're proposing and you already have in practice. So again, being merged into the code itself rather than as a resolution, which is what we currently have. Article 10, conflicts of interest and disclosure of confidential information. Again, this is starting to get into some things that might be in the ethics code. These are sort of starting places and holding places for that. We do need to have a section on budgets, so that's what Article 11 covers. And what we've done here, what we're proposing to do here is you have very detailed budget sections of your charter.
I was going to say there's a lot of
Um,
budget.
But
laid
what
out.
we're doing here is again expanding on it. We're bringing the calendars into the administrative code, making them a little bit less wordy and more tabular so they're followable. Again, so this is for transparency too, right? So anybody looking at our code should be able to understand when the budgets are going to be presented in the process. Hopefully this is a starting point for you to discuss how to do that. We need to have a section on finance and accounting, and that's Article 12, or at least the proposed Article 12. And, we have to have the city to have the ability to have bank accounts. So these are all things in your charter. You can switch slides, Bert. But the types of things up here are things that we all do, but we don't think about the procedure. They're all authorized by the charter, but now we're setting forth the procedure. So how do we, what sort of fund policy should we have? What sort of investment policy should we have? What sort of borrowing policy should we have? How do we process transactions? All those were things covered in some part and sometimes not by the third class city code. Obviously, Article 13, procurement and disposal of city property. Insurance and bonding is dealing with several significant insurance issues, which we just want to make sure are covered. A new article here is records and record retention, which is an article intended to make sure that we're compliant with the state record retention law, which I know is an issue that's been before this council in the recent months. Next slide, please. Article 16 will have whole lot more sections than 1 and 2. The main reason is that employment guidelines is going to be broken down into a whole lot of subcategories. That whole long list that I spoke about earlier would be included in there. Keep in mind that the administrative code does not need to lay out every procedure. It needs to lay out how procedures will be created as well. So there will be things here that are directing how policies are enacted. And if they're enacted and they affect, for example, the citizens and residents, how do people know about them? So when you get to the general provisions, which skipping civil service for a second, you'll see publicly accessible website. So there's going to be some requirements that we're suggesting be built in here about what has to be on that website, how it's used, how it's maintained to assure that residents and taxpayers and others that are interested have good, clear, and up-to-date information regarding city affairs. Obviously, Article 17, civil service, that is a law that predates many of the laws and is mandated on us. So the civil service provisions, which we already have in our existing codes, will be brought here into Article 17. Next slide. So how this is starting for you. This is just the start, but four meetings, work sessions of the Committee of the Whole have been scheduled. One a couple weeks from now, one in July, one in August, one in September. The plan, if I can meet all the drafting needs, is to present about half of this on June 17th and work through that on the 17th and the 15th with still ability, obviously, to carry on with more discussions and then present the second half for discussion on August 19th for discussion on August 19th and September 16th. One of the key components to this, obviously, is what happens with your ethics code, which you're ultimately responsible for drafting. But you can't draft it without input from the Ethics Commission. So this schedule is in large part controlled to some extent by how fast we can get your Ethics Commission up and running and giving you the guidance it needs to draft that first version of an ethics code.
Which is why it will be in the second phase of the work, not what's presented obviously on June 17th.
Sure.
Next slide, Bernard. So next steps. Council action. Well, you've already got one you're starting with, which is completion of the Ethics Commission appointments. Review a draft of the administrative code and complete transition, really to complete the transition from third-class cities to home rule is to adopt this administrative code ordinance. One thing that's not on here, and I'll say it, I think it's probably logical, but I really do think before the meeting on the 17th, I would highly recommend that council members spend a good deal of time really looking at the charter and reading its language repeatedly, really digging into it, because it's what's going to control this. And if you don't have a good understanding of what's in the charter, it's going to make this a harder process for you. By understanding the charter really well, you'll see immediately when these come to you where we are expanding on what the charter asked us to expand on, and where the sort of the impetus is coming from. Your questions and guidance are vitally important throughout this process. This will be your code. It is the city's code. It is every city council's code. And the beautiful thing about it is it can be changed as environment in the country changes, as law changes, as the city adapts, as you adapt. From just a personal note, I started practicing with the city in 1994. To actually be part of this and have the opportunity to hand this to you and let you do what you need to do with it is a real big honor for me. It's something that is a living, breathing document that I take extremely seriously about the provisions of sound governance coming through it. The city has, fortunately, in my opinion, been soundly governed for many, many years, but the third-class city codes have restricted it from creative thinking, creative decision-making. This is going to require council members to maintain sound governance and marry that against critical and unique thinking, and not subvert the process for, well, we just want to, do something that no one's ever done before and the law doesn't allow. This document is sent to guide you to make sure that you're thinking through everything you need to think over time. And so I look forward to meeting with you, each of those 4 meetings, to getting questions from you and the public. I know we'll talk about a way to submit questions so that we can get revised answers and drafts and research throughout the process, because it's going to be a lot. I'll tell you that we're not done drafting, and we're at about the same length as the charter, in small font, 11-point font, not the same size font as what's in the charter. So there's quite a bit there. But again, a lot of it shouldn't be real new. I mean, there's a good portion of it that's really not. We will try to present information in a way that you can understand where it's coming from, where it's been changed, where something's new. And hopefully this will be a process that we can get done here over the next several months.
Can I, really quick, I want to kind of go back to the idea of the work session and how those meetings will go, because this is going to be very different than even a committee meeting like we're sitting here, although this is kind of my first step in hoping to bring us together on those. These work sessions will really be similar to the Home Rule Study Commission's work, in that we will be having discussion. There will be time for questions, but there's no action that's going to be taken, no votes that are going to be taken at these meetings. So, Barry, you said, come prepared, know the charter really, really well, because everyone will be asked to weigh in on these things and kind of bring your perspective. And some of it could be super easy and it makes sense to just simply carry things forward, but there will be things we'll need to make some decisions about, but there's no voting when we make those decisions, because what we're doing is putting it all together into one administrative code that will be, have a first reading to adopt it on October 28th on that schedule before us, and then a second reading and a vote on November 11th. So the work sessions are truly just that. They are places for council to have discussion. So my hope is that everyone will come really prepared to do so. And it is, like I said, very different than our regular meeting as well. So just be prepared for that.
And if I could just add to that, thank you, Council President. You're not going to have days to review the first tranche of this. We're going to send it out to council and make it public. And Barry's going to do a walkthrough of the content and show you the sections that reflect major changes and sections that are the continuation of the way that we have been doing things. All of it is up for grabs, but we're going to try to focus on the things that are of significant change. Council will then have several weeks, 2 weeks or so, 2.5 weeks, to then submit written questions, as will the public. Those written questions will be funneled to the solicitor's office, Then he will work on responding and doing research and whatever else that is necessary to respond to the inquiries, draft alternative language for the consideration of this body. And then at the second meeting, July 15th, we'll review all of the questions and comments from council and the public for that section, have further discussion. And then where there's consensus, great. And where there is still not consensus, and we may need to come back to that particular topic, we will figure out a time frame for doing that. But we kept this so that by the middle of September, we kind of have given, you all have given the administration marching orders in terms of like where you want to see final language. Then with a sufficient enough time before the end of October to actually see a revised and somewhat final draft before adoption in potentially in November. So I just want to explain the cadence of the meetings because they are going to be different. But you will have, like, the homework for now is just read the charter. The next batch of homework is to read the draft and provide comment, ask questions for clarity, things like that, then discussion. And then we repeat that whole process for the second tranche of content. So, and I think we've done our best to try to split the content. It's not all going to flow like one article after the other because some things are still in draft form. Some things we still need, like the ethics code. But we're trying to like give you the things that, and a little bit of a balance of like, this is relatively easy, this is a little bit more complicated, rather than putting like all the hard stuff into one bucket. We're trying to navigate that so that there's a cadence where we can kind of like the flywheel can start moving, because it is a lot, but it's not a lot that's changing. But there are certain sections, of course, that are new and that things that are being added to change.
And we hope that consensus will be easy on a lot of them and to put some humor into it. So for example, if you remember, one of the various first topics was short title. Like normally this would be called Administrative Code or City of Lancaster Administrative Code or Administrative Code of the City of Lancaster. We would hope that like we can get consensus on one of those fairly quickly and easily, right? Now, there are going to be other things that clearly require your input and that you're going to have different opinions on. And again, what we're attempting to do is give you a starting point. This is not, hey, you have to do this, because this is council's. That's A. And B, there are lots of reasons that some of these things may be changed or not changed. So it really is a starting point. It's going to be the most significant in terms of length piece of legislation this council's done during the mayor's term. And I can't think of one longer in my time here. And in some ways, a lot of it is minutia, but a lot of the minutia is really important. So that's why we ended this with, your questions, your guidance is vitally important.
And counselors, I think one of the biggest takeaways, besides read the charter and get ready for this, is that, and nothing that we're doing is written on a stone tablet. Just like today, we change pieces of our existing administrative code often by ordinance or resolution. So we can change these pieces, but we need to get one in place. We have a ticking clock in front of us, and it's good work to dive into, but it's not something that can be never changed again.
Nothing here is ever written in stone. The only thing that's really written in stone is that you can't make any significant changes to the structure of government within 5 years without going through the same process we just went through.
Right.
That's written in stone.
Right. That's the one.
What's in the charter is written in stone, but everything else is written in pencil.
Great. Thank you so much. Anything else on that topic? Counselors, anything to add?
I have a question, if I may. For those that don't read English, will there be translations?
For this group here?
No, for anything that's going to be.
Well, I mean, I'd have to ask the mayor whether the staff will be able to translate drafts as they're moving on. I can't answer.
Yeah, let me get back to you about that, because we try very hard when we're doing official business like this to have a professional translator translate the concept, like the concepts of government, which can sometimes not get translated well in like a Google, for example. But I'm not sure that we're going to have the staff capacity or the financial resources in our budget now to translate iterations of this, but translating at the end. Yeah, so let's talk about it because I think that that's going to be a challenge for us on the timeline that we have to translate each section in-house.
There is software though that can automatically translate.
Yeah, it's just what we found with that, Counselor Diaz.
Not Google.
Yeah, it is
That's-
some of it is not some of it is not translated as well as we would like if someone were actually, walking through it and talking about how to explain this particular concept in a different language.
Just in case anybody comes forward and says, why hasn't this been translated? I will just direct them to you because you would be the one that would be responsible answering and being transparent to them because I'm sure it will come up.
Yeah, and obviously we would be happy to if there are specific sections that people are particularly interested in, we can certainly work to address those particular areas. But as it relates to a 100-page document that's going to continue to be revised multiple times, I just don't know that. I know that we do not have the budget line item for translation that would support that.
Thank you.
Anything additional from council?
Thank you, Council President. My only comment, I guess, would be more of a comment is, other than reading and getting more familiar with the charter, how could we make sure that this body stays on pace with these meetings and not try to rewrite the charter in a working session?
Well, I guess that's going to be hopefully some guidance from me and being able to point you to where the charter already controls something. And then just to focus as a group on where the goal line is, right? So like you may have to make some concessions to the shortness of time at various points where like, okay, we've deliberated this for an hour on the point of the name of the code. I think we need to move forward. And I think as a group, you guys will be able to do that. I'm in terms of the timing, I'm more concerned ultimately just with the ethics part of it. And that has an absolute 12-month deadline. And for me, getting them done together makes the most sense. Trying to do the admin code after the ethics code is challenging, even though legally we have 6 months longer for this. That being said, that to me is the biggest challenge to the time frame. Is ethics code's got to get appointed, and then we need to get them convened with a meeting to give some feedback and ideas, and that's going to take more than one meeting. I mean, they're not going to be able to come up in one meeting. The study commission fortunately did a whole lot of work on ethics commissions, and we have a whole lot of information assembled by the study commission, Pennsylvania Economy League that was guiding them that we can give to the ethics commission to get them started to give us the feedback necessary to get started on an admin code, on an ethics code provision that you ultimately are still responsible for. Their job is to give you preliminary input. Your job is to then draft and adopt.
And this is also for your discussion as a working group. I mean, if you guys want to create a little bit of, how you want to work together, that you check in after 15 minutes of discussion and decide, is there consensus around this? Do we need to move on? That there are some kind of agreed upon ways that you want to carry this out. Yeah. That basically, if it's presented and, Mr. Handwerger's like, okay, does anybody have any significant concerns? And if there aren't, okay, we're moving on. Just that kind of pace. And then where there are concerns and, if it's only one person that has concerns, then that person gets heard. And then if there's any other additional conversation about it, if not, then, we do have to go with consensus, but also everyone should be heard. So you all can decide how you want to do that.
I would also say, I would encourage you to use the month in between each meeting to, independently send questions over. I mean, obviously you can't deliberate by emails in between,
Right.
but you can send questions to me that I can, and you have a question, why did you do this? Or why does it say that? Why doesn't it say this? Those are the types of things that we can certainly work to answer to keep maybe the work sessions moving a little more fluidly, because some of those preliminary questions will have already been answered.
And I will say maybe even if we could have some education to the public on the process and the timeline, and if they could also ask questions in between directly to the administration, so the meetings aren't getting bogged down with, a question and answer session.
I will say that the work sessions, because they're not legislative, won't have general
Okay.
public comment. The question and answers that we are submitting can also be submitted
Well,
by the
there
public.
will be general comment.
Yes,
but-
I'm sorry,
but
not
they-
specific comment is really what I'm saying.
Right.
General comment, yes, similar to the Home Rule Study Commission meetings.
Yes.
But for each individual item that we're
Yeah.
working on, no. So they will be able to use that, and there is going to be communication.
Yeah,
I'm looking at
to
you
the
'cause we
public.
talked about this a little bit in preparing to the public about what these sessions are, how they will function, and how they can ask questions. And, the drafts will be available to them the same time that they're available to us. So,
Yeah. And so I think just for those of you just related to home rule on the point of public comment, the work sessions happened, there was dialogue among all the home rule commissioners, and then at the end, they took public comment, and the public could comment on any aspect of anything that was discussed or even not discussed as part of the charter. But there's not, it doesn't require each individual section to pause for public comment. It's one public comment.
That was
at the
what I
end.
was mainly.
And the
it
other
will
thing
be
is that
passed by ordinance as a whole.
you will be able to say, if you have a question, instead of asking the question during the public comment section, submit your question. If you have a comment, we have comments, so that you can sort of keep the public sessions to opinions, comments, suggestions. Question and answer can be through the process.
And the point of having that gap in between the meetings is to have time to gather their answers to the questions, find the resources that we're looking for, and have them for the next meeting so that we can answer everybody's questions, with some authority and not make a guess.
Right, and keep in mind that, I don't like to sort of like say, I need the time, but in reality, you're doing a lot of new things and you're under a new structure of government. And you may have a question that I literally don't have the answer to. I will have to research, and research doesn't happen in a day. We can take some time to make sure we give you the right answers, or the public the right answers, so that you're getting the right guidance throughout the process.
And a 2-week period to submit those questions also, so that the public and members of council have time to formulate those questions and.
Right.
Yeah. Great. Anything else?
I was gonna ask real briefly, is there anything we've seen from other cities that have undergone this process that we should take note of? Either things that have gone well, things that have not gone well?
Well, in reality, no, because we're the most recent city to do it in quite a while. The other municipalities that have converted to the home rule, one, have been different types of municipalities, have oftentimes come out of Act 47, and had different financial constraints and or different issues. I will tell you that I've looked at other administrative codes. I've tried to pick the parts that were done well. I've relied on guidance from Pennsylvania Economy League to point out where they thought admin codes were particularly well done or particularly not. But is there any one model? No. And the answer reason is because our charter is unique. It's a charter unto ourselves. It's not the charter of Allentown. It's not the charter of, a particular borough, Mahanoy City, for example. While all of those may have some nice language and concepts, they're not yours.
They're always different. I try, because I have a friend that she's a city council person in Minnesota, and we talk back and forth about the charter. And she goes, "Oh my God, your charter is really crazy," and she would give me her feedback. So they're all different.
Anything else?
Just
Counselor
a
Cleese?
comment. The only reference that we would have to draft the administrative code is the home rule? Or,
Yes.
so to what extent the administrative code must comply with state law?
Well, it has to comply with the home rule charter law.
Yeah.
It has to comply with our charter. It's those 5 enumerated topics that must be covered. It can't be inconsistent with the charter. So you can't say, for example, the best, easiest example would be the charter says you must meet twice a month. Well, we want to take, only do like we've been doing and have one meeting in July and August each. You can't do that. You can't write a code that does that. You have to have a code that's consistent with the charter. The charter is your enabling authority.
No, I mean, to state law.
Again, the charter now as a home rule municipality, you can do anything that's not prohibited by state law.
Okay.
So there isn't any state law that's going to say this has to be in your charter, other than the 5 things that 5 topical areas that I covered earlier, and a few topics that are specifically set forth in the charter.
Okay.
It's why this is a really challenging process, is to try and figure out, A, what do we want to do? B, how should we do it? And then C, how should we write it? And fortunately, the third class city code in many cases is a well-written document. Not all state legislation is, and parts of it I might quibble with, but in general, we've been operating in certain ways because of it. And some of those things are incorporated here and because they are best practices. And then there are areas where the charter adopted essentially third class city code practices. So again, we have some guidance in the form of a third class city code, but we're not limited by it to the extent that it doesn't conflict with the charter itself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else for the good of the order? I thank you very much for giving us that introduction.
Thank you,
I
Counselor.
look forward to diving in.
I look forward to seeing you again in June. Thank you.
And indeed, in July. Okay. Yeah, so council, you have that, yeah, that's our June.
Again in
Okay.
June, I should say. You're right.
Again. All right, so we'll continue with the committee of the whole. This begins resolutions that will need to be introduced or moved out of committee if council wishes them to be. We begin with Council Resolution 41. That's recognizing Immigrant Heritage Month and World Refugee Day. Councilor Ahmed, you're introducing this one. If you'd like to share a little bit about it.
Yes, thank you, Council President. This is an annual resolution to recognize World Refugee Day and Immigrant Heritage Month, which is June of 2025, and World Refugee Day is on June 20th. And this resolution is just going to honor and recognize the contributions made by both our immigrant community as well as celebrating World Refugee Day here in Lancaster. And that concludes my report.
Great, thank you so much for doing that. And Councilor Ahmed, do you have a motion on this one?
I will move Council Resolution number 41, 2025 to our next meeting of full council on the 10th.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any council comments on the resolution? Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, this is committee of the whole. Sorry, we're doing it first, so we're all backwards. Okay, all those in favor of moving that to our next meeting? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. Our next resolution, number 42, is recognizing Juneteenth. Councilor Craig, you are introducing this one. If you have anything to share with us.
Not particularly. Juneteenth is a relatively new holiday for most people, but in the African American community, it has been recognized for a very long time. And I'm just pleased that the city of Lancaster has taken it upon themselves to recognize Juneteenth and the history behind it.
Thank you very much. And do you have a motion for this one, Councilor Craig?
Sure do. Motion to approve, motion to move to full council on the 10th.
Second.
Any additional council comments on it? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you so much. Next resolution is resolution number 43, recognizing Pride Month. I am glad to be introducing this one again this year. So it's important, I think, now more than ever, that we recognize the celebration of Pride Month. I also appreciate that June has many different celebrations, and all have equal time and can be celebrated together. And I think that that's truly in the spirit of celebrating Pride as well, particularly in a year when our trans neighbors are also very much in danger. It's important that we come out and support this community with this resolution. So I would make a motion that we move resolution number 43 to our next meeting of council on June 10th.
Second.
Motion and a second. Are there any council comments on the resolution? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you so much. The next item under the Committee of the Whole is Administration Resolution number 44. This is authorizing a flag raising to mark Black History Month in 2026. So I always appreciate when people get out ahead of these things. We are required to approve these flag raisings, and this was submitted by the NAACP Lancaster branch for Juneteenth flag raising, and it was submitted. Oh, that was last time. Okay, and so I don't know if I have the date. I apologize. Let me just click on that. On the old submission that we changed. And this is submitted to take place on February 2nd, 2026, with a backup date of February 3rd, 2026. I would make a motion that we move this resolution to full council on June 10th.
Second.
A motion and a second. Councilors, any comments on this one? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. And related, sort of, Administration Resolution number 45, authorizing a flag raising at City Hall to mark Juneteenth in 2026. Again, getting out ahead of that to be prepared for next year. And I'm just bringing that up to ensure that I have the right dates. And this was also submitted by the NAACP Lancaster branch, and they're requesting to do the flag raising on June 19th, 2026, with a backup date of the 18th in case calling for inclement weather that day. I would make a motion that we move this resolution to full council on the 10th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Councilors, any comments on the resolution? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. Thank you. And that will conclude the Committee of the Whole. Thank you, everybody. We'll now begin the Personnel Committee. Councilor Cleeks, do you have the floor?
Thank you, Council President. The Personnel Committee has 4 items on the agenda for tonight. And the first item is the nomination of Marlisa Yoder Bontrager for appointment to the Shade Tree Commission. Marlisa, would you please join us? Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for your willingness to serve. And, would you please introduce yourself, starting with your name and block of residence, and tell us why you want to serve on the Shade Tree Commission?
Okay, my name is Marlisa Yoder Bontrager. I first moved to South Ann Street in 1988, so I've been there for a long, long time. And I've been involved with tree planting in that area just about since 1988. And it's been neighborhood tree planting. It's been also in the Northeast. Yeah, I value trees really highly wherever they are, but I think in an urban environment, especially with the city's goals for water, stormwater reduction, general life quality, cooling, all those things, I think they're just a really valuable asset, and I'd like to do more to support the city in getting more trees in the ground, keeping the ones that we have healthy.
Thank you. Are there any questions from other members of the committee? Comments?
Thank you, Marlisa, for stepping forward. I know you bring a lot of background, like you said, to this issue. Are there things that you feel like, as far as what the city's doing, and getting its both the street trees and shade trees, but also just its overall tree canopy, things that the city should do better, or what maybe things that are going well?
Yeah. I think that we could do change the traditional approach of just putting a single sidewalk street tree in, to doing planting strips, to doing cluster planting in areas where we're off the sidewalk a little bit, and in that way create more habitat and more stormwater reduction. I think that there could be more coordination probably between departments. I don't know a lot of the background, but it seems to me like sometimes sidewalks are put in without maybe consultation with the from the tree perspective, from the city arborist and the urban, what are you called, Mike? Forester. The urban forester. So I would like to see a very tight connection between when work is being done and always keeping in mind what the opportunities might be for adding trees to whatever location.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? From council as a whole?
Counselor
Please.
Cleats, thank you. Marlisa, thank you for being here. I just wanted to make mention, are you a nurse also? Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for doing that, what you do, and then also being interested in shade trees. I just think that's neat.
It's kind of lifelong.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
So now I'll make a motion to move this nomination to our next council meeting on June 10th.
Second.
All in favors?
Aye.
And the personnel committee also has 3 other nominations for reappointment to the civil service board. And those individuals have been working on the commission on the board for quite some time, and they have expressed their willingness to continue serving on the board. So we have the nomination of Lloyd Henry for reappointment to the civil board, and the nomination of Donald Palmer and Tina Darby to the civil service board. And are there any questions or comments from members of the committee regarding those nominations? From council?
I was gonna say the only comment I would make is I think might make sense to move all of these at once.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to move those 3 nominations to our next council meeting on June 10th.
Second.
All in favors?
Aye.
Aye.
I just wanted to add, if I may, Councillor Kaliks, that we're very fortunate to have Lloyd Henry because he has a long time. He's a retired firefighter. Donald Palmer is a retired police chief. And appreciation for Ms. Darby, who regularly attends the civil service obstacle course training for our police officers and has made herself available to assist in those efforts. So I think these are definitely folks who have shown a commitment to the work.
Thank you, Mayor, for your comment.
Great.
Thank you, Council President.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cleats. I failed to mention this at the beginning of the meeting. The next item is the Finance Committee. And I just want to make an announcement now that Resolution 46 that appears on your agenda is being withdrawn for this meeting. There's just like some timing issues there. So they will reapproach council with that when the timing is right. But we're not taking it up. So therefore, there's no Finance Committee meeting this evening. And that will take us to Community Planning Committee. Councillor Craig.
Thank you, Council President. The first item we have 2 items on the agenda this evening. The first being the review of the Historical Commission's recommendation for 101 South Queen. Is there anybody from the Historical Commission here to address that? Yes, no,
Mr.
maybe
Goodell
so.
is here
Councilor
and
Craig, I'm happy to come and speak for a moment. I also think it's Ryan, correct?
The
It is,
applicant is here.
Ryan's
Okay,
here,
Ryan.
representing as a project architect too.
Okay,
So you can both just step up real quickly if you'd like.
Great.
Sure.
happy to have you. I would like to know just a little bit about the project. Just
Sure.
kind of overview.
My name is Ryan Griffith. I'm the president of Cornerstone Design Architects. We are working with Brentwood Builders, who is our client and the developer for the property. The property was it's a historic hotel, but it was a blighted property. It actually doesn't have stairs, so there's no access to the third and fourth floor, without a lift. So the building was
that makes it interesting.
it makes a survey something that I asked my staff to be very careful with.
Yeah.
But it is it's a property that the
This is the Swan Hotel.
it is the
Yes.
Swan
Yeah.
Hotel, yeah.
Interest.
So it is a property that was the Convention Center Authority put out an RFP. And Brentwood Builders was the successful proposal for that. And so what their proposal is that they're going to adaptively reuse it, which is just converting something to a new use and bringing back an existing building into something that can continue to be useful and preserved. And so the use would be for a 21 unit, basically temporary and vacation rental property,
I like
an Airbnb type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that it's technically going to be through that service or not, but that idea. So the idea is that they want to be able to preserve the corner and the building itself. And then they would like to be able to do it's here because of a demolition, right? But the demolition component to this is the stairs that were removed were non-historic, but there's a piece of the roof basically that's going to be the existing dormers on Vine Street, so not one of our main street facing facades, that will be partially demolished in order to create some unit space and a roof deck up on the Vine Street side of the street.
So that building is not, it's not that big.
Correct.
So how are we gonna get 21 units of community in there?
I think, Ryan, if I might jump in, I've got a few notes here, and
Sure.
if I misstate it, please correct me. You're right, Councilor Craig. It's not a particularly large property. This has been one of the challenges for the redevelopment of the site. It is a significant investment to do the historic rehabilitation of the building, but then making the economics work of the project has been really challenging, which is why it has sat vacant for quite some time. This particular use for the site is actually a really good fit. It's going to be a boutique hotel, but it's a contactless hotel model. And I have in my notes here that it's a total of 11 units for the building. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
That does make more sense, and I apologize for
More
that.
sense.
Yes.
Like
11
Yes.
it's bunk beds.
I have a lot of stuff floating around in my head, so
Okay.
I pulled that from something else.
Okay, great.
Yes, and I thought Ryan described very well that there's just a small portion of the building that requires demolition, but as a whole, this historic asset is being preserved. The Historical Commission did recommend approval. I don't believe it was controversial in any way. That's why we don't have anybody here from the Historical Commission this evening. Just a little more context on the site. We had a zoning interpretation question earlier in the process. That zoning interpretation question has been resolved. The project is on a good track right now and still needs to go through land development, I believe, or some portion of land development?
I think that they're still waiting on land development, and then we'll be working towards permit submission,
Yes.
building permit submission in the next month.
Great. Are there any questions from the committee?
So, sorry, did you say it's just gonna be the units, the 11 units? There's no commercial or other component to it?
That's correct. So the original take on this or concept was that there would be 9 units and a small speakeasy kind of
Yeah.
bar or restaurant. The reality is that there wasn't a great way to fit that in and still get units in there. And the bigger reality and the more important thing is that there's already plenty of bars, restaurants, southern markets across the street. There's plenty of
Yeah.
places to eat and drink in this area of the city. So
Yeah.
it's more like supporting that, having a place that is not a hotel room in your most traditional sense to stay.
Yeah. No, I like the concept, and I just know that there was definitely interest in that, but what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it would have been a workable and fun concept, but it would have been really small scale and probably only used by the people staying
Yeah,
there.
right. This makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Are there any further questions from the committee? Go ahead.
Thank you, Councilor Craig, and thank you for being here this evening. My first question is, what happens to that parking lot in the back of the hotel?
The parking lot is I believe owned by the convention center.
Yeah.
So it will be staying as their property. I'm not sure what plans they might have for that.
They use that service parking lot for loading in
Yeah,
and
like
for
the buses.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of anything that would be changing that.
That was also one of the challenges to the redevelopment of this property was that the convention center needed to maintain that surface area parking lot in the back.
And then my final question is with, just 11 units, what are the rates, the nightly rates gonna be in order to get a return?
That is outside of my pay grade at this point. So I'm not sure what that's going to look like. I'm sure that there's some kind of formula that they're going to use that it needs to compete with Airbnb as a service. It needs to compete with hotels as a service. It needs to offer something a little unique in being in a historic building and being particularly located like it is. I'm not sure what the rates are going to be. I would guess that you could probably stay at the Holiday Inn for less, for example, but you're not going to get a rental home by itself for something similar in there.
So would these be like 1 to 2 bedroom layouts with, kitchens and
It
separate
is,
living
yeah.
spaces?
Yeah, so kitchenette light is kind of how it is, and it is really, it's someplace where if you could see yourself maybe visiting Lancaster for a week, right, and seeing the sights or being here on business or being here for a wedding or whatever that might be, that it can be like kind of a touchdown space for a week, maybe a little bit more so than a hotel. So that's the idea, and there's 1 bedrooms, and then there's really cool loft spaces up on the upper floor that will have access to that roof deck that's being created with part of the demolition. So I think I think it's going to be unique in a lot of ways and be offering a little bit of a different stay experience than a lot of other places are currently.
Thank you.
So the Marriott will be retaining the parking lot in the back in its entirety?
They will, yeah.
A convention,
Yeah.
the convention center.
Yes, they will. So I think there's a fence there now. There will be a bit of an addition that's going off of the back of this, which is going to be creating an space for an elevator and stairs and a lobby, and then the roof deck above the elevator and stair towers. And so by the time that gets added onto the back of the Swan, you can see when you drive past, there's a little bit of there's a gate beyond there, which that fence is the property line. So it is a small property, and they'll be kind of backed up against a parking lot there.
Are there any further questions from council as a whole?
Just to put a fine point on it, Director Delphs, the demolition and construction that we have before us were both deemed appropriate and meeting all the standards for the Historical Commission. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Make sure we all have that. I'll have seen that in our memo, so thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Are there any questions from the public? No? Okay. I'll make a motion to move this to full council on the 10th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is resolution number 47, authorizing submission of the community development block grant and annual action plan. And I see Ms. Geiser making her way to the table.
Counselor Craig, if I
Yes.
could just mention to members of council, the presentation, this was sent to you just before the meeting, so you do also have it in your inbox.
Madam Mayor, I think we sent it to you 2 ways and paper copies.
Okay, good.
I have a few
Cover
paper
all
copies.
bases.
But we have
I love paper.
Technical difficulties will not hold us down.
No. Here's the one we got too. I might have enough. I have more. No, wait, these are my notes. You have yours as well. Good.
Or maybe
One for
200.
Counselor
I
Ahmed,
just need one.
and one for Counselor Diaz, and one for Counselor.
It's also going to be up on the,
Oh, I gave you enough.
I can also share.
There's more.
There-
Counselor
you-
Diaz, would you like a paper copy? Oh, they got one. Great.
Great, thank you. Teamwork makes the dream work.
Okay.
All
Always.
right, thank you. Oh. These also- Would you, Counselor Diaz, would you kindly pass these around? That's gonna come up later. Well, good evening, Madam Mayor, Councilors. My name is Jen Rummel. I am the Community Development Administrator within the Department of Planning and Economic Development, and I manage our community development block grants funded by the Department of Housing and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. I'm pleased to present to you tonight our 2025 fiscal year annual action plan for the utilization of our 2025 Community Block Development Grant. Before we get into the allocation details for this year, we'd like to present a brief refresher of the Community Development Block Grant Program. The CDBG grant is administered by HUD, and it provides annual grant entitlements to cities, states, and
Sorry, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry.
There we go. That's it.
I'll try to keep an eye on both things that are going on. The CDBG program, which is administered by HUD, provides annual entitlement grants to states, cities, and counties to help develop viable urban communities by providing funding and support through the following: provision of decent, affordable housing, the creation of a suitable living environment, and the expansion of economic opportunities, principally to benefit low to moderate income persons. HUD authorizes CDBG to be spent on the following eligible community development activities, and those are listed on the spreadsheet that you're looking right now: affordable housing and preservation and production, public infrastructure improvements, public services, economic development, and planning and administration. Is yours wonky?
Yeah,
It's all right. Next slide, please. Okay. Some of you may remember this from the CAPER presentation that we did back in, I believe it was March. I'd like to give you a reminder of some of the impact that the CDBG program has had in the last year of our 5-year comp plan. So some of the information that we captured in 2024, approximately 20,121 residents were served in 2021. We estimate that 17,000 of those people were impacted by the 11 ADA ramps that were installed in low to moderate income areas. 364 individuals were documented to have interactions with our health and housing social worker, Sonia. 422 individuals benefited from consulting with our 2 police social workers. 823 individuals participated in neighborhood engagement programs, and that was just of the information we collected. And 95.8% of those who received assistance through that CDBG funding were low to moderate income. Next slide, please. This is just a visual of some of the partners that we work with and some of the programs that we fund.
So we've been lucky enough to work with Tenfold for their fair housing program, Assets for their community economic development program. SACA has been a partner of ours in helping to develop and rehabilitate affordable housing opportunities. We've also been able to fund internal programs, like I mentioned before, the police social work program, the critical repair program, and the proactive housing code enforcement program, as well as supporting work in the comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. This one's really hard to see, and I apologize. Just a couple of demographics captured from our 2024 CDBG expenditures and the people that we assisted. 35% identified as white, 21% identified as African American or Black, 37% identified as other or multiracial, and 5% declined to provide an answer. As far as ethnicity goes, 57% identified as non-Hispanic and 43% identified as Hispanic. Finally, in 2024, CDBG programming supported a majority of low to moderate income resident households. 45%, or 344, from those from whom we collected financial data, qualified as being extremely low income. 28%, or 215 people, identified as being low income, and 22%, or 168 people, identified as being moderate income. So as you can see, the CDBG program continues to affect the daily lives of low to moderate income city residents daily, and the city continues to monitor and engage with its community members to learn and adapt to new and ongoing needs to serve the city's greatest needs. So we expect to see similar results with the 2025 program, and we can't wait to tell you about what we plan to do. Next slide, please. Okay, so on May 15th, 2025, the City of Lancaster learned its anticipated entitlement award amount of $1.413 million, which represents a reduction of 2.59% from 2024. We're comfortable anticipating program income of $25,043, which brings our anticipated total to $1,438,690. That's the amount that we're using to plan our allocations for 2025. Unfortunately, the city fell below the threshold to receive ESG funding again this year. However, we continue to work with the Commonwealth to receive allocations for partners within our own community. The Community Development Office is looking forward to using our 2025 allocation to build upon the success we've achieved over our last 4 years of our comp plan. As I mentioned, our comp plan runs from 2021 to 2025. We are now in the 5th year. The activities we plan to focus on supporting are strong neighborhoods, safe places, a sustainable economy, and sound government of within the mayor's strategic plan. The comp plan focus areas that strengthen neighborhood and housing, expand economic opportunities and build communities, and build upon the interim housing strategy to emphasize, produce, protect, and sustain affordable housing. This plan ensures that we are still able to meet our community development priorities set out in our 2021 to 2025 consolidated plan, and we can continue to maximize community impact while minimizing any adverse budgetary impact to the general fund. Next slide, please. So taking a larger look, on your spreadsheets, you can see on the blue section a complete breakdown of how we plan to allocate the funds, but here we're grouping them. So through our extensive community engagement efforts in 2020, we identified 4 priorities that are HUD eligible goals for our funding. And our current goals are to maintain a quality, affordable housing, increase affordable housing opportunities, promote neighborhood quality of life, and expand economic opportunities. So in 2025, we're using the funds in this way. $620,000 we're planning to use to develop, maintain quality, affordable housing. $370,000 for public infrastructure improvements, $182,000 for public services that improve the quality of life of our neighbors, $20,000 to expand economic opportunities, and $248,000 for planning and administration. Next slide, please. Thank you, Bernard. Despite the fact that the city of Lancaster has seen a successive annual reduction in CDBG resources by about 2 to 5% every year since the beginning of their comp plan, due to reduction in census data, the city nonetheless is tasked with leveraging its funding to create and foster a viable, resilient community, to develop and implement mutually reinforcing approaches to providing housing, creating quality living environments, and expanding economic opportunities for the primary benefit of low to moderate city residents and households. Because 2025 is the fifth year of our 2021 to 2025 consolidated plan, earlier this year, the CPED team evaluated its remaining balances from previous years of the comp plan and performed a comprehensive analysis of ongoing and growing community needs. And as a result, we brought forth in, I believe it was March, a substantial amendment to City Council to reallocate the unspent fundings to ensure responsible and timely expenditure of CDBG funds pursuant to the city's strategic plans and the overall goals in the comp plan. As a result, the remaining balance of $1.166 million is represented in this graph. That brings us to our full funding picture of $2.605. So we have the ability to, we want to show you what the full picture is with our carryover and with our new allocation of what we're able to accomplish this year with funding. So this slide provides a larger picture of what we're able to accomplish when we combine I'm sorry, next slide. Bernard, I'm sorry. So this shows us a better detail of what we're able to accomplish when we combine our rollover funds with our new allocation. We're proposing to allocate $1.51 million to affordable housing preservation, development programs, including the city's critical repair program, the proactive housing code enforcement, and affordable housing development solutions. We just completed an LOI process to try to help match some of our community partners with best sources of funding. Next, we plan to allocate $445,000 to public infrastructure improvements by subsidizing street improvements and community projects in low to moderate income neighborhoods. We are also planning to allocate $193,000 in funding to support public services, which include the health and housing social worker, the police social workers, and the tenfold fair housing program, among others. We're planning to allocate $40,000 to support economic development activities and providing funding to assets. Just a small note there, their contract begins on July 1st. So it's technically a 1-year allocation, but with their fiscal year beginning July 1st, it's 1 year, but it's starting later. So it looks like 2 fiscal years. Finally, we are proposing to allocate $416,000 to program administration and city planning efforts for projects such as the East End Small Area Plan. Next slide, please. Thank you. So when combined with the rollover amounts, I just wanted to show you that as the city has told us, and we responded, more than half, 58%, of the funding is being allocated to maintain quality affordable housing. 25%, which is a combination of 17% of public services and 17% public facilities and 8% of public services, is being dedicated to promote quality of life in the neighborhood. 2% is being allocated to expand economic opportunities, and 14% is being allocated to planning and administration. So this funding strategy supports goals set out in our current comp plan, despite a reduction in funding, and reflects overall consistency with the CDBG framework that we've laid out over the last 5 years. Some additional information about individual, like the 2025 allocation, and then how it's combined into the overall allocation can be found on the spreadsheet, on the second page of the spreadsheet that I provided. Next slide, please. If you have not had a chance to look at the annual action plan, that QR code will take you directly to it. So hard copy is still available at City Hall, and you can navigate to it also by going to the City Hall website, clicking on City Government, going down to Community Development, and then finding the draft 2025 Annual Action Plan on our website. Next slide, please. Here's a little bit of our timeline. So we were pretty proactive. Our 2025 Annual Action Plan was posted to our website April 22nd, 2025. We have a required 30 days for posting. So we put a notice in the newspaper about a public meeting and about the AAP being available for view on April 22nd. On May 27th, more than 30 days had passed and we held our public meeting. There was no public comments received by phone, by mail, or in person. Our public comment period closed Wednesday, May 28th. And again, no public comments were received. Next slide, please. Just one more reminder that this is year 5 of 5. We wanted to tell you a little bit more that we're looking forward to in community development. We are in the early stages of planning our consolidated planning process for the 2026 to 2030 cycles. Please stay tuned for opportunities to provide feedback on how you can help to inform CDBG funding and to shape your community going forward. With that being said, I would like to open the floor to questions or comments you might have at this time.
Are there questions from the committee? Questions from council as a whole?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I'm always really interested in seeing how we do a little bit more or maintain with less every year. And obviously the carryover amount will be really impactful. How would you say that we're impacted? Was this allocation impacted by most recent federal budget cuts? And will our carryover allow us to maintain, particularly in the planning and administration? Does that include the salaries of people who are funded, salaries are funded by this? And will we be able to maintain them longer to do good work for our community?
So as of now, the reduction in funding is solely related to a census change. We were keeping an eye on announcements regularly to see when they were announced, and they were the CDBG allocation was announced right around the time it usually was this year. And with the amount of funding we have, we are able to continue to fund all of the internal positions. I don't think we've had to make compromises. Can you comment on that? Have we had to make compromises?
Yeah, I think from year to year, if we have had vacancies in one year, then that money would carry forward. And as long as we are administering the programs, this cut was not any greater. In fact, it's a little bit less than we were anticipating.
Yeah.
So that helped. So we are good through the middle of 2026 with this budget for CDBG. And then the recent budget conversations at the federal level, if there are CDBG cuts, would impact our 2026 allocation, which we would find out about in May next year. And then we have to make some decisions. So as we go into the 2026 budget cycle for the city budget, we won't know what's happening overall with the CDBG budget.
The timing is always very difficult.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, that's something worth mentioning. We did plan ahead. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking that question. That was what I wanted to know. I see a question looming.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Councilor Craig. My question is, do we anticipate any rollover of funds from 2025 to 2026, especially given that there's a lot of uncertainty in what funding will look like further?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Generally, there are funds remaining. We have a requirement when we get our next year's allocation, or as we're closing out 2025, we're only allowed to have 1.5 times the allocation remaining. So they are requiring us to continue to spend down the grant. So we have to be mindful of that deadline in November. Simultaneously, we will have money at the end of 2025 to cover at least the first 6 months of 2026. And often in larger pots of money, for example, affordable housing development solutions, if there aren't partners ready and able to spend the money, then we often carry that forward as well. So staff vacancies and community needs really drive the rollover from one year until the next.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions from council?
Not really a question, but a comment. Excellent presentation. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Rebecca. Your team does good work. And I just want to continue to point out that like of all the things that the city could put this money towards, it continues to put it into housing. And I just think that that's noteworthy. We all know that the affordable housing situation is difficult out there, but the city continues to prioritize addressing it. And I just think that's a really good thing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, I'll make a motion to move this to full council and attend.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
That concludes community planning.
Thank you so much. Mr. Harris, the last item on the agenda is the clerk's report, confirming that you've submitted that in writing to all members of council. He has. Okay, thank you very much. Then having reached the end of our agenda, I will hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.